Hi, I'm Bob Canode. On this episode of the Camp Chaos Chronicles, I'm here with my friend Jason Anderson, and we're going to put this here head on that there flow bench. Are you excited?
Yeah, always.
Dang it. So the point of this exercise is to take this cylinder head, which is off the TWR 6.1 liter engine, put it on the flow bench and see how it flows. And then what we're going to do is compare that information to what I have in my notes regarding a pre-HE engine that I had him flow, well, my track car cylinder head that we did several years ago.
How long ago has that been? It's been over 5 years.
Oh, it's got to be over 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So we're going to do that, and then in the future, I don't have a pre-HE head that I'm working on currently. What we're going to do is we're going to compare that data to the pre-HE engine, the stock one, so that we got sort of an apples and apples comparison. So what do you think? Should we get busy here?
Yeah, let's mount it up and throw some air through this thing.
Perfect. So Jason, explain how we're going to set this thing up for testing on the flow.
Sure.
bench.
So we're gonna flow one intake, one exhaust. We just put a spark plug in there, otherwise you have about 20-30 CFM going through that.
Okay.
But we're gonna put the valves in, and we're gonna put some what's called testing springs. They're just a lightweight spring so that we can open the valve in different increments. It'll be 50 thousandths increments, and then we'll just flow it till even past your peak valve lift, just to see what the port is doing, even beyond what you're lifting it to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you need this rolled over.
Yep, we'll roll this over, get some retainer and keepers.
Yeah, that looks good.
We'll do the other. Just make sure that it bottoms out at on the guide instead of the spring bottoming.
Binding the spring.
Yep. Now we're ready to center it on the bore.
Okay, so this is the flow bench. Basically describe what's going on here.
Sure. There's massive vacuum motors in this thing, and there's 8 of them in here. And they simulate what's happening in an engine as close as possible. And it'll pull at 28 inches. So it's a standard depression. When we're doing the intake, it's going to pull air through the cylinder head, and it's going to measure how much airflow in CFM, cubic feet per minute, is going through the head. And then when we switch it to the exhaust side, it's going to reverse the flow, and it's going to measure the air in the same CFM on the exhaust side.
We got an adapter here.
Yep, an adapter here that's close to your bore size, and typically we'd have a dedicated bore adapter, and it just simulates the bore of an engine so that we're getting as close to an actual running engine as possible. Typically we would drill and tap for what you have, and we'll do that in the future if we do more of your cylinder heads here. But for now we just marked we centered the gasket on here, and we marked where the head bolt holes go, and we'll center it as best we can using that, and then we'll clamp the cylinder head.
So this whole thing is simulating the engine.
The engine itself.
Okay.
Yep.
As closely as possible.
And when we do the flow test, we'll lift the valve in 50 thou increments all the way to, we'll probably flow it to 600, whatever the cylinder head will take. And it's almost like taking snapshots of what's happening in the port itself at those different valve increments.
Okay.
Obviously in an engine the valve is going up and down, lots of times a second, but it just gives you an idea, especially a A-B comparison of how much airflow. And we can use those mathematics after getting that data. We can calculate power gains by looking at the flow curve and
So what we're going to be doing here is basically sighting down the holes in the cylinder head.
Yep.
To see these circles that we made off of the gasket.
Correct.
And just clamp it in.
Yeah. For
Okay.
now. Yep. That's how we're going
All right.
to do it.
So let's go ahead and do that.
All right.
Jason, what are we looking at here?
It's kind of a mess, but it'll work. So what we have here is this is the valve opening fixture. It's kind of a universal thing that I came across years ago. But we got a dial indicator set up so we can open this valve up in like I said before, 50 thou increments, and measure the airflow through this box will tell us what the airflow is through that cylinder head.
Now, does that log the data?
It can. I don't have it hooked up to a computer right now.
Okay.
So we're gonna manually write down the numbers, and then afterwards we'll graph everything out and get comparisons.
Okay. All right.
Yep. This is a radius inlet guide, they call it. You can use, a lot of people use different things. The quickest, easiest way is to just use clay. And basically what that is it's helping straighten the air out as it goes into the port to help better simulate what's happening. Otherwise you'll get air. If you didn't have this on, I've seen 30 CFM drop
Really?
in airflow because the air hits this wall and then has to negotiate the sharp turn to get into the port. So it helps keep everything more real world, more
So it's kind of like a velocity
comparable.
stack.
A little bit, yeah. Now we've also tested heads with the entire induction system on, intake manifold, throttle bodies, or carburetors, or whatever else. So we can do that too. Even headers, if we have room, we can test the cylinder head with the header on too. Or we can use a pipe like this, put on the exhaust side to help simulate what a stub header would do.
Okay. All right.
And you'll see different variances in airflow, definitely, between having the full intake and induction system on it and the whole exhaust system on it. So
Okay, so we're going to go with 50,000 increments. Is that what you
correct, and we'll go as far as we physically can, given the spring and the retainer and the guide clearance. But we'll just keep going and see what the port likes.
Okay.
And we'll just start a test.
So what we're going to do here is we're going to open it to 50 thousandths first, and then check what the numbers are up there.
All right, so it'll read CFM right here, and we're going to take a measurement, record the data at each lift, and then for fun, we'll throw a pitot tube in, and we'll be able to measure the velocity through the port in feet per second. We're going to be below 150 CFM. We're going to put this on. I'm going to turn it on first with the valve closed, just to make sure we have a decent seal on everything. We're good because it's not, we're seeing 0 here, so we can start a flow test here. I'm going to call that 30. And a half. Now I have to go to a different range because we're going to start maxing it out at that range.
Now those numbers are still going to be good?
Yep. What happens is if we get this down here, then we have to change the range. Oh, 92 and a half.
So it's pretty linear at this point.
It sounds good too.
Is that right?
Yeah. As we lift the valve, you'll start hearing some gurgling happening and other things. Yeah. And that's an indication that the port is going turbulent. Okay. 125 and a half. Oh, whoops. We gotta go. Now we're gonna be above 150 CFM, so it changes the. There's a baffle in there that changes. Yep. 165.5. 79. Kind of fluctuating a little bit now. 192, 93. We'll call it 192. It sounds pretty good yet. Okay. 198. There, now it's starting to, because it's turbulent, it went down in flow. Okay. So now it's 195, 190, kind of fluctuating.
So really, as far as your cam is concerned, you wouldn't have to go any higher than that?
Probably. That's as far as we can go. Man.
Okay.
Yeah, 194.
So what I see here is that we're starting out, it's pretty linear, 30, 60, 90, 125. Then we get to here, it starts slowing down.
Correct.
And it really starts to slow down up here. What's happening between here and there?
So you're starting to max out the valve area itself. And the port velocity could be getting too high. Especially right here, you'll see 198, and then 203 is where it maxes out at 500 lift, and then it actually starts backing up on you. I mean, it's still flowing air, but it's what's happening is the port is unhappy at this lift range.
So at this point right here, a half inch of lift is about as high as we'd want to go with our cam lift.
If you're going to run this head the way it is, yeah, that would probably be where, if you want to keep the port as stable as possible. And again, you're just getting a snapshot.
Yeah.
And at 28 inches, where in a running engine, it's probably actually pulling more inches than that. So what's happening here is typically when it starts going backwards, it's the speed at the floor of the port. So what they call the short turn radius. So there's the long side is the top of the port. The short side into the valve seat area is the short turn. And a lot of times the air, because you're moving much more air, 200 CFM here, through that smaller area, the air becomes detached from the port itself, and that's when you see this. A lot of people call it turbulence, and that's what that is happening right at that lift.
So this is why smoothing out that radius on the short side, and also opening up the bowl underneath.
Yes, when this happens, you want to help to slow the air down. And there's different ways you can do that. You can do that through shaping the short turn itself, or making the cross-sectional area larger at the short turn to help the air stay attached as it goes around.
And the valve guide is in that location too.
Well, that's more on the top, but that can still influence what's happening. You have to look at the port as a whole. Everything influences each other, and that's when, if we put a probe in the port, then we can see the localized airspeed in the port, and we can do that really quick right now.
Yeah, let's do that right now. What do we have, and what are we going to do with it?
This is a pitot tube.
Okay, yeah, I'm familiar with
it's hooked up into the flow box here, and so what we're going to do is, this is what they call probing a port. We're going to put this in, so it's going to measure the airspeed right at this orifice here. So we can pinpoint what we're trying to measure and where we're trying to measure it by putting this further in, down towards the short turn, or up on the roof, and we can see the airspeed in feet per second here on this on the screen here, and we can see more clearly where the airspeed is highest in the port. And that helps us figure out if the airspeed is too fast in a certain area, or if it's too slow in a certain area. We've actually filled areas in a port depending on the racing class, will fill areas in a port where the air is just dead, and that helps keep the airspeed. What you're looking for is the best average airspeed. You want the least amount of variance throughout the different areas in the port.
Okay, regarding airspeed through the port, what did you see?
I saw fairly even airflow around like the runner itself. So before it gets to the valve bowl itself, it was it looked like 350, 360, maybe 370 in certain spots, which is pretty fast. When I got to the short turn, so just as the floor turns into the cylinder itself, I was seeing somewhere between 380, 390 on one side, about 415 in the middle of the short turn, and about over 420.
Really?
On the.
So what does that mean in terms of the performance of the port?
So and I set this up at 500 lift, which is where we saw the most airflow. The air after that point, as we lift it, the air just can't go around that short turn anymore because it's going way too fast.
All right.
Yeah. So that's why we're seeing at 550 lift, the airflow actually drops a little bit because the air is coming detached from the port wall.
So as far as a street car is concerned, which is what this is.
Yeah.
If a person was to, the stock or the cam in the engine is pretty much stock.
Sure.
I think it's like 375,000 slip.
Oh, that's it, huh? Okay.
And they still got 410 horsepower out of it. So if you were to put a higher lift cam in it, 475 tops, something less than 500.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that would give you good low end as well as high end performance.
Because the port speed is high and it's still flowing to 500. Yeah, this would be a good all around power band. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yep.
So now let's compare it to the HE notes that I have regarding the HE heads that you ported for my track car. That'll be interesting to see. So this is what we got with the TWR 6.1 liter head, and this is a test that we did on the pre-HE, or this is the test that we did on the HE heads that are on my track car right now. The valves are stock size valves. Everything, the parts are stock except for the intake port. So what do you see here?
Okay. So this was, so if we cover that up, this is a factory stock head right here. And you can see this one maxes at 450 lift, and then it started to go backwards from there. This is after we did some port work to it. And it's flowing, it peaks at 550. So this one held on longer. What we're seeing here is, if you look at compared to what the head we just tested, about the same right off of the valve seat. Still in the 60s. We're actually a little better on that head. And then that's where things change. You got 88 at 150 lift, where we're in the 92s already. 114 versus 125, 134 versus 145. So that all makes sense to me because of the valve size. You have more valve area, so you have more usable valve area, especially at that lower lift, and it just keeps going from there. The good thing about this head, though, is you're still in the ones. Let's see, where does it peak? 187 at 550. 195 at 550 on this one because it started going backwards.
Yeah.
But we're not that far off with an even much smaller valve.
Really?
Yeah. So if you looked at it in an efficiency way, this head is probably a little more efficient than this one. We could maximize this head probably with some more work.
The TWR head.
Yeah. If
the goal is to produce maximum.
Yes, if you were looking to put that head on like a race car, where you're gonna try and get every bit out of it, then we'd have to address the short turn where we saw that it was going.
Now I was thinking about taking this cylinder head, a pre-HE cylinder head, and unshrouding around the intake port, and then installing a bigger valve. But we'd just be shrouding a larger valve,
right? And you're
not. Would it make sense then to just clearance the outside of the valve and then take a little bit out of the dish and the piston?
So depending on what you're trying to do, I would put a valve size in that is going to work best for what RPM, bore size and RPM is what we're looking at when we're trying to figure out the optimum valve size in something.
So we'll discuss that further because I'd really like to make the HE head worth something.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
As far as high performance applications are concerned.
Sure.
Because I got a lot of them.
Yeah. And that's something we can do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So what we're going to do is we're going to print that out on a graph like this.
Yeah.
So that we can, and then also what we'll do in the future is I'll come back with a pre-HE head. And we'll do the same thing so that we'll have an apples and apples kind of comparison.
Yep.
So I can tell you one thing, that on that HE head, when I put the headers on it, the noise changed dramatically. It's like the intake note went up an octave.
Yeah. Especially if you get a tuned length for what the engine wants. And I think that's what we did when you built those headers, was getting the right length for what the RPM range was and all that. So
there's a price to be paid for perfection.
Yes.
Like it ruined my life for 3 months, number one. And number two, it takes like 8 hours to put them on and 8 hours to take them off. Never do that again. But there's more of that in the future.
Right.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll do the exhaust side, just so we got some numbers to compare to the pre-HE head that I'll bring in later.
Sure.
Now, if you look at the numbers here, we can see that the exhaust is significantly less than the intake. Now, what is the relationship, should the relationship of the numbers be between intake and exhaust?
So for a long time, there was a rule of thumb, you wanted like 70 to 75% of exhaust fluid intake flow. That's changed. It all depends on what you're trying to do. And a lot of it can be adjusted in camshafts. So adjust the duration or lift or both, but you can always adjust for a low ratio by just doing a custom grind camshaft.
Okay.
Yep.
So what we're seeing here is eyeball percentage.
Yeah, it looks like you're probably in that 60% to 70%, and a lot of that has to do with how efficient that intake port is. You know, the angle of the port is raised up, where the exhaust port, it comes out, it has to come out straight. And so...
And this number also has to be improved with a header.
Yes, that's the other thing I was going to say.
Okay.
Was
All right.
if you can use the tuned length, use the header to help pull the exhaust out, then that just
that
helps
number
this.
goes up, so your ratio is going to increase.
Right, and if we were to throw even a stub pipe on this thing, this, say at 500 you're at 150, that could go up to 165 or even more.
Now the TWR engine came with a set of tuned, I assume, tuned stainless header.
Yeah, the manufacturers, they were always fighting between getting the performance out of it, but also the packaging.
Yeah.
Which is,
Getting
things under the hood. Yeah.
I can tell you, it's awful trying to get a set of headers on one of these things.
Right, and that's probably why the exhaust port is an afterthought on these. It looks
so we could actually bring a set of headers in.
If we
And
can
now,
get
does it
them
make any difference which way they are? Could you actually have the thing turned around so that it's
upside down,
and you can actually get it on the machine?
Ideally, no, but we could just, we can just try it. If it fits, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the fun stuff that we can do with the flow bench.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of people will say, flow bench numbers don't mean much. It's just like dyno numbers. It's data. It's a tool. Yeah. But it helps in developing more horsepower.
This is what is what it could be doing.
Yes. Right.
If we put it on the car and did everything
right
to conform to what we just discovered here.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'll be back in a couple of weeks with a pre-HE head. Stock pre-HE head, and we'll see what the difference is. Thank you.
We'll be ready for you.
Yeah, it'll
Thanks,
be
Bob.
fun. This has been a great field trip.